Hello and welcome back to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. We're so glad that you're joining us once again as we discuss the topics on our heart and mind. We hope you're enjoying listening.
It's the winter break.
Yeah, we're getting there. Going through the year very quickly. I can't believe
it, halfway through the year already.
This has been one of the faster years of my life, I feel like.
Every year. But, I love winter in Brisbane because it's sunshiny days, beautiful blue skies, a little bit of a chill in the air at night.
Yeah.
It's the best time of year.
Maybe a little more than a little chill. Like I had to get up very early this morning to drive our daughter to a school activity at like 6 a.m. It was 8 degrees.
Yeah.
Which is cold for Brisbane.
Well, it is cold for Brisbane, but you're from Atlanta, so, that shouldn't be so cold for you. In Brisbane, we consider it cold if we have to put on a jumper.
Yeah. We're still wearing thongs or flip-flops, but then we have to wear a jumper to stay warm. Well, I thought with the current year, it's an election year in America for the presidency, and of course,
there's a lot of elections going on lately. There's been the European Union and various European elections, and there's a lot of politics in the air.
There is, and so unless you've been living under a rock, you would know Biden and Trump are running for the presidency. I know it's not all official as of right now, but that's pretty much who the two candidates are going to be, and never fear, we're not going to endorse either of them. No, I'm not here to endorse either, but to say I'm watching the world because the world is watching this, and I'm just grateful that I'm not in America right now because I would have to watch those political campaign ads every single
It's enough that we have to cope with all of the online barrage. And this is the thing, in Australia, they have elections. I think they have to have them 6 weeks after they're called. So there's like this 6 weeks period where you get bombarded with stuff, but that's it. It's over. And I just think that they really need to learn from that. There should be a maximum amount of period that you can bombard your population with election propaganda.
Well, in America, we always go big. We always do it big. So
go big or go home.
But what I am noticing is there is such a divide, I think, in America and a lot of the West right now between conservatives and liberals and the left and the right and Republican and Democrat and whatever name or title you want to put to it. There's such a great divide. Yeah. And regardless of which side you stand on, I feel like there's a bit of this hope that we're putting in these candidates to say, you're going to save us. Like if the other...
And I think it's all over the world too.
Yeah, but we sort of are saying if that guy wins, the world is over. And like I've heard many celebrities talk that way, that the end of the free world will happen
if somebody... It'll be the end of democracy. It'll be the end of the world. It'll be the end of the country. Yeah, and it's happening all over the world. It's not just happening in the United States. There's this real polarization of people to one side or the other. You can call them left and right if you like, but to me, it's just opposite sides.
Different points of view.
Yeah.
For sure.
And they're heading further and further away from each other in different directions.
Yeah, away from the beautiful middle that I love. But the concern I have is as Christians, as believers, how do we navigate these times? Not to just pick a candidate to vote for, but how do we navigate the chaos of it? Because there's a lot of very dramatic and hyperbole,
hyperbolic.
Yeah, like stuff that's said that creates fear, that creates this sense of not having peace, not having joy, that if such and such happens, then the world's going to end. It's like little chickadee, the sky is falling.
Yeah, it's always disaster. And part of that is, we've talked about this before, the sensationalization of media. They have to get clicks because they don't have newspaper subscribers anymore. I used to work for a communications consulting company, and we had a newspaper editor come in and talk to us about the changing landscape. And he basically said, we now have a 24-hour news cycle. We do still get a newspaper out, but not very many subscribers for the physical newspaper. what we have to get is clicks. We have to, for this 24-hour news cycle, we've got to push out content that will get people to click. And the way they do that is by having this real sensationalized kind of perspective and the polarization as well. They find that if they polarize the content to one way or the other, there's going to be more clicks, more engagement, and that's what brings their revenue. And so we see this all over the world. The media is pushing this polarization and this agenda to divide us just because that's how they make their revenue now. It's a new digital model.
Does nothing for your sense of peace, though.
No, it doesn't. I mean, the media's never helped with that, really, but it certainly is driving away peace, but it's also putting a divider between people. You know, that love that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, that is being eroded because of polarization. So what do we as Christians do in this polarized environment?
Well, I think we have to be aware that regardless of who gets elected or which party has the power, we have to remember that there's a greater authority over them that we follow and that cares about us, and that's God. So irregardless of what happens, we need to take a step back and realize that actually God's in control. He promises to take care of us. He promises to meet our needs. He's, our protector, our provider, all of that. My worry is a lot of Christians are almost idolizing, like it's almost a form of idol worship, idolizing one or the other candidates, and they put all their faith, like it really is. They put all their faith, they put all their hope, they put everything into this man, this person who's valuable, who, it's not God, and that all of their future hopes and dreams and whatever else are placed in this person. And I think that's a really dangerous and precarious position to put yourself in, because if that person doesn't get elected, now what are you doing? It's as if your God has been toppled.
Yeah.
Where do you put your faith in?
And my concern also is when we're talking about either side here, but if you group an entire conglomeration of people, of very diverse people together and say they are the enemy and I hate those people because they don't share my ideology and my belief system, my political belief system, they obviously can't be Christians. They must not know God, da, 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 da. So you're impugning their faith, you're impugning their character as a person, you're objectifying them and dehumanizing them and characterizing them as evil just because they don't vote for the same person as you. I think that we're stepping into really dangerous territory when we do that as Christians.
For sure. And it is definitely not following what the Bible teaches us of how we're supposed to see one another. They're supposed to, particularly as Christians, we should have unity, we should have love, we should have support for one another.
Yeah.
And it's okay to disagree. I know that's controversial.
Yeah.
It's controversial today. If I disagree with you, we can't be friends anymore.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you can. We can disagree and still be friends. But I just am concerned about how much faith we're actually, and I'm using that word intentionally, faith that we're putting into a man, into a person.
Yeah.
When our faith is supposed to be on God.
Yeah.
And I think as Christians, we have to keep that in the back of our mind, regardless of our political persuasion, that God is ultimately the one in control. God is ultimately the one who has the authority and the power, and that's who we need to be looking to.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible tells us all the time to have faith. When I want to challenge myself with faith, I always say to myself, do I believe that God is who he says he is or not? And that always helps me to reframe my perspective. Am I anxious in this situation? And if I am, why is that? Because God has told me this. He has promised me this. So do I believe he is who he says he is, or do I not?
That is a great little sort of personal checkup. I as well do that. I think about that at times. Recently, just kind of going through some stuff myself and just looking at the future and what do I do and which path do I take. And sometimes, particularly lately, I feel like God's been very quiet. He's not giving me a whole lot of clear direction personally. And so it's one of those things where I have to intentionally remind myself, I trust you, God. And do I really believe that? Do I really believe that God is who he says he is? And he's promised certain things and, his character. Do I really believe those things, even though my experience currently doesn't match up with that? Do I believe ultimately God is those things? And am I willing to keep trusting him, even though maybe an outcome or information or whatever is not at hand for me? I have to learn to just keep trusting him. I think that's something we all have to do. And it's easy in today's climate to look at this political race, particularly in America for the presidency, and get outside of our peace and get outside of ourselves and get worried about what's going to happen, who's going to be elected, and if they do, what's going to happen after that, and what will they institute or what will they bring in, when God's the one who, he says in the Bible, every authority is in place by him. So one, we have to trust him.
Yeah.
And I know if you look through the Old Testament, there were a lot of evil leaders, a lot of evil kings. God put those people in place, and sometimes it was for punishment, sometimes it was just how it was going, but then there were times where he would put the good king in place. Yeah,
I'll just read that verse. It's Romans 13:1. It says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God." That's a really challenging verse, It's saying that every authority that is put in place is put there by God, that none happen without his approval, and that we're supposed to be subject to those governing authorities. That's a hard thing to do, and I think a lot of people in this really polarized environment struggle with that because they say, it's not my president, it's not my prime minister, I'm not going to bow to that authority. But the Bible tells us to.
He does. Well, and I always think of Daniel and the other Jewish exiles that came into Babylon, right? So here they are, 15, 16 years old, taken away from their country, put into servitude, and in service to a pagan king who probably just killed most of their family and all the stuff that has happened. And yet you see Daniel, you see him serve the king faithfully. He never backs off of his own beliefs and his own, morals and faith, but he still serves this pagan king who is not serving God and has done all these horrible things. I don't know how you do that. We see that throughout the Bible. There's several examples of that. Joseph, he's sold into captivity by his brothers, and he ends up in Egypt and serving, a pagan Pharaoh. But yet God blesses him through that. And by being obedient to that authority, even though it's not an authority that is in alignment with God, God blesses the country and blesses people through that other person who's being obedient.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good lesson. That story gives us such a great example. When the ruling authority is doing us wrong, when we submit to God, who has put that authority in place, and so we are subject to that authority and we serve with the grace and integrity that God would have us serve with, it blesses the whole country.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it blesses others, yeah.
Do you want what's best for your country? Then pray for your leaders, whoever they are, with a heart of love and sincerity.
Which I think is really hard for us to do, particularly if your leader is somebody that's on the other side of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
And
if you're shooting hate daggers in your heart at the leader of your country, how do you think that's going to go in the spiritual realm? It's not going to be promoting the kingdom of God and the things of God.
Yeah. But I think we get caught up into what we see in this earthly realm. I think that's what happens is we take our focus and we take our eyes off of God and we start putting it on a person, and that person's always going to disappoint us.
Yeah.
Even if your candidate gets elected, at some point they're going to disappoint you. They're going to make a decision. They're going to do something that disappoints you or doesn't live up to their promises. And if we put our faith, that's the thing. If we put our faith in a person, that's some really shaky ground. I just think that's walking on ice.
Yeah.
But if we put our faith in God, He's faithful. He never changes. He's immovable. He's good.
Yeah.
He's all those things. And so to trust Him is a much better thing than putting our faith into a person.
Political leaders will come and go, but God remains. And, we are called to love him with every part of ourselves and to love others. And if we can focus on those things, then, we're going to be living within his will. I think it's really important not, as you say, not to just put your hope in the temporary, into people, into ideologies, into political systems or parties, but to put our hope in God, because he is the author and perfecter of our faith.
Well, I've lived long enough to realize that nothing is forever. And so whatever party is in power at this time, in 10 years, it's probably going to be different. Life moves on, life keeps going, and the pendulum swings one way and swings back the other. And so I think we have to realize in the midst of all that God is in control, and just trust him and look to him, because he, like I say, he doesn't change.
Yeah. And I think that you hit the nail on the head with that word control. I see a lot of people talking about the politics and leadership and all that as though they have some kind of control over it, as though they get angry because they're not able to control it. They thought that they should be able to, or they would be able to. But the thing is, it's God who's in control. It's not us. And if we really want to see a godly leadership in our country, we should be spending that time in intercession for our country and for our leaders. We should be spending that time in prayer. We should be spending that time building our intimacy with God and loving each other in our community and bringing people into the kingdom. The best way to advance the kingdom of God is to love people and share the gospel with them and bring them into the kingdom.
Yeah. I know I'm just sitting here thinking, like, it would be challenging for me to pray for certain political people, like to actually pray in a sincere way for their good and for their benefit.
And it would definitely, I've done that. I've actually sat down and done that, and it changes your heart towards them.
Yeah. Well, you have to let God change your heart, or else you can't pray. You can't pray for them in that loving, sincere way, to see them succeed, to see them do well.
Yeah.
It's hard. That's a really hard thing. I think it's a discipline.
It says in the Bible, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
That's right.
Whoa.
I know. It's a hard one. That's one of those ones I like to read over a little quickly.
Yeah, we just skip over that one. No, but I mean, really, when you do that, it does change your heart towards people. It does change your perspective. And I would challenge anyone listening, if you feel antagonism towards any kind of group of people or political party or leader or anything like that because of a difference of opinion, maybe you don't like a war that they're supporting, or maybe you don't like the way that they treat the poor, or whatever it is, sit down and sincerely pray love and blessing and hope and peace and joy over that person, and success and all of that, and prosperity. Pray all good things over their life with an open heart and a sincere heart, and see how it changes you.
You might even ask God how to pray. I know I would almost have to start by going, God, how do I pray for this person?
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
How, where are you working in their life? I love those really open-ended questions for God. What are you doing? What are you saying? Where are you working in this person's life? How do I pray for them in a way that blesses them and blesses me, blesses my country, that I'm living in?
And it might take you doing it daily. It might not be the first time you do it that you feel change, but just commit to doing it every day. I'm going to pray for them every day. If you're passionate enough to have those kind of intense feelings about politics and political figures, commit to praying every day for that person that you feel is persecuting you or is your enemy. Commit to praying for them from a place of love, and watch slowly as your heart changes towards them.
Well, I think that's the biblical model, isn't it? Because God wants us to have unity. He wants us to have love and compassion. And it's not about which side of the political spectrum you sit on. There's no fine print about who you pray for, who you care about, who you show compassion. It's about doing it obediently because God tells us to do that. And it does change your heart when you start to try and see someone as God sees them, no longer, as you were saying before, I think we dehumanize each other because we put names and tags and slogans and on someone that sees the world differently to us. And so we vilify that, and then they become less human. So then they become less valuable. They become less worthy of love, but they are still made in God's image, and they are still valuable and loved by God. So to see them through his eyes is a challenge, but it's also something that I think we need to do if we're going to be in the right standing. And if we want God to intervene on our behalf.
I think it comes down to faith again, because if you ask most Christians, do you change the world with love or with hate? I think most Christians would say love, obviously. We believe that the gospel message, which is a message of love, changes the world, and that's how we want to see the world changed. But then as soon as they step away from that conversation and look at politics, their whole perspective can change immediately. I'm not talking about everyone, but I think there's a large number of people, their perspective changes. As soon as they look at politics, they think, we have to change the world by force. We have to grab a hold of this, and I'm angry and I'm full of hate for this group of people who are trying to ruin everything or whatever on either side. I think that it's so important for us to remember, no, we change the world with Jesus. Jesus is the one who changes the world, and through love. It's done through love. We have to believe that. If that's what the message is that we are promoting and that we believe, we have to actually walk that out in faith.
Well, see, I think we try to take it by force because there's a fear there. There's a fear and a sense of not being in control. Love is a vulnerable position. Love has vulnerability to it. To truly and sincerely love someone, you have to be vulnerable to some degree. And to receive love, you have to be vulnerable. And so love operates in vulnerability, whereas force operates through strength or power or whatever else. It's control. And like control and manipulation, Bible talks about that being like witchcraft.
Yeah.
When you start to try and take control.
Control over others, yeah.
Yeah, because God's actually, as I was saying before, he's the one who's actually in control. So if our faith is lying in him, we're not going to feel like we're out of control. We're not going to feel fearful. We're not going to feel afraid.
Yeah, if we actually trust him, then why would we be fearful about what's happening? We look around and we see what's happening and we go, wow, that's not what I would do, and it's out of control. And there's a lot of bad stuff going on. But if we trust God, if we actually believe he is who he says he is, and his promises to us that he will never leave and forsake us, then we can have rest assured in that. We can feel confident in that.
And, I think this is applicable to any situation where we feel out of control, where we don't feel like we're getting our way. As I was sharing about myself, like I feel a little out of control about my future right now. I don't have a lot of surety with that, but it's coming back to knowing that God's in control and remembering his promises, stuff like, I'm going to work all things for good to those who love me and are called according to my purposes. So even though I might be going through a wilderness right now, God's going to work it for good.
Yeah, and he will, because he is good. We have to remember who he is, so his character, what he's promised. And if we believe in him, then we have to have that faith that no matter what we see going on around us in our life, in our world, in our community, he is still that God. He doesn't change. The Bible tells us that. He is still a good God with the character that is described in the Bible, and who has promised us those good things. And we have to hold on to that even when, faith is believing the things we don't see.
It is, yeah.
And so sometimes we don't see it. I mean, trust us, we know this. We've lived it many times. And we still just have to hold on in faith to who God is and what he's promised, even when we don't see it. And he always delivers. He always turns things around, and in ways that we didn't expect. It doesn't necessarily go the way that we wanted it to, but he always delivers.
And it's always good. It's always good. So my challenge for you today is, regardless of how you're feeling or what you see going on in the world, my challenge is for you to turn your eyes from the chaos, from the worries, the anxiety, and turn it back towards God. Trust him. Believe his word. Believe his promises. And I think you'll receive his peace, his joy. He'll renew your hope. And you'll be able to stand even in the midst of the chaos that's going on around us. This has been the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. May you have a blessed day.